Hey, what's up, guys? We got a great show for you today. We're going to get into a number of topics. DeMarco Jackson versus Zach Baum for the top linebacker depth position. PFF's running back rankings. They had Alvin Kamara 13th. Is that a fair place to place him? And what is the ideal way to use Taysom Hill this season? We get into that and a whole lot more. We are presented by PJ's Coffee and coming to you from the Better Call Bado podcast studio. So while you're out and about, make sure you go and check out PJ's Coffee. They got locations all over the city, some of the best drinks and pastries that you can find. And if you need legal help with any of the following: car wrecks, offshore injuries, 18-wheeler collisions, Maritime and Jones Act, hurricane and storm claims, you better call Bado at 504-323-7777 or 985-303-7777 for your free consultation and case review. Hardhide Ponchatoula Strawberry Whiskey is an 86 proof blend of aged wheat bourbon, American light whiskey, and fresh Ponchatoula strawberries. Lighted in New Orleans, it is not for the thin-skinned. Look for it in your favorite stores, bars, and restaurants. And also check out Ideal Market, home of the freshest produce in the city. They're doing great things in the community. They won the Peter J. Larkin Award from the National Grocers Association for outstanding community support. They always bring the best quality food products at the best prices and are the home of the largest variety of Hispanic and international foods you will find in the entire state. They have a hot deli that surpasses many restaurants in their flavor for authentic Hispanic dishes, and they are the best place to cash checks, wire money, pay bills, and they have a customer service department like no other. And while you're out and about, make sure you check out Firehouse Subs. Great people doing great stuff for the community. All right, let's get into the show. Well, Brooks out dodging lightning bolts and thunder or whatever they're doing up there in Baton Rouge. We're here recording the show. We got a lot of stuff to get into today. Tomorrow, OTAs come back. And with that, I kind of want to start with one of the topics that's kind of gripped me a little bit, probably a little bit more than anybody else, but the backup linebacker battle is absolutely fascinating to me. There's Zach Baum and whatever he might be, and then DeMarco Jackson, who feels a little bit closer to being what he could possibly become. As you handicap this, like what are your factors looking into it, and who you back at?
Well, yeah, I wanted to talk about this today too because you have a keen eye for the guys who are jumping out early in OTAs usually.
Oh wow, all right, I'll take that.
Usually.
When we talk privately, you like to bring up my misses, so that was nice. I needed that. That'll get me through the day.
I will always remember Willie Snead. That'll get you for. I mean, you were in on Willie Snead. Like I think you saw half a practice, and you like laid out his career. So there are misses though. I don't want to I don't want to pump you up too much.
CJ Spiller,
but you. We are in that same boat together. I mean, CJ Spiller's different than the young guy looking good on the practice field. We both thought, well, CJ Spiller's obviously going to get 2,000 yards.
Right, right idea, wrong back.
I'll never be wrong about anyone. But you've been noting that your hopes are getting higher for DeMarco Jackson, and you even said, I think it was on the members only, that it makes you feel better about the linebacker depth overall. Which I mean, that's a big leap, obviously. But I'm still kind of like the one guy holding down the fort on the Zach Baum island. Like, that's mostly circumstantial, though. Like, all the reasons that I have a little faith in Zach Baum is opportunity, obviously. They need somebody to be the third linebacker. Experience is his fourth year in the system. He's the Sam. The Sam is the guy who will get on. I mean, DeMarco Jackson will probably need an injury to get on the field at Mike or Will. Baum will get on there as the Sam. Maybe Caden Ellis is too fresh in my mind, but it's the exact same thing. Moved from edge rusher to linebacker. Took a while for that transition to take hold. I was watching Zach Baum after practice the other day. The guy looks like he's in incredible shape. They still have him listed at 6'3", 225, which is what he was listed at, like his combine measurements. I want to talk to him in the locker room. He can't still be rocking 225. He's put that weight on, I think. He's played 80% of the special team snaps each of the last 2 years. There's a comfort level there. I've got to believe when you add all that together, how can he not have his best season? But predicting Caden Ellis, that's quite an extent. But if we were buying like penny stocks on these guys, which is what they would cost right now, I kind of want to buy a little Zach Baum penny stock.
You're on the pink sheets.
Yeah, like if we're having a competition right now, you're buying the the DeMarco Jackson stock. I'm buying the Zach Bond stock, and I'm going to see who wins. It's a little different than our Pro Bowl bet that we had a couple weeks ago, but I want to put that on a board somewhere.
Why? Like why? Like
Just,
why? Like honestly, like why? Like why do you want to put your name on Zach Bond?
Because, like I said, circumstance and opportunity. I mean, I'm looking more.
But what about the player?
Like, I don't think we know what the player is. I assume he's not a good player because he's never he's never won his opportunity to get on the field. Caden Ellis passed him up, but he's the guy. Like, they didn't bring in anybody else to surpass him, and like I said, he's the guy that's going to get those Sam snaps. He's gonna get.
I'm not sure about that.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm not sure.
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
I think there's a chance. Like Bond probably has the inside track on the Sam thing right now, but like I spent Friday night watching DeMarco Jackson, Appalachian State. He is awesome against the run. He is an awesome blitzer. He is probably faster than Zach Bond. The only reason that I think there's like a voice in my head that like says like keep an eye on Zach Bond is because Caden Ellis existed. Yeah. If you take Caden Ellis out of this and there isn't like the prototype model, the path of going up, I think that we'd just be kind of like the ship has sailed. But it was kind of like, well, it worked for this other guy.
I am mostly the ship has sailed. I'm not trying to overstate things, but I'm just trying to say if you're looking for that, who saw this coming? He's a candidate.
I don't see it coming.
Yeah.
I don't see it coming. He's not on my horizon. If he appears on the horizon, like I'm cool with it. I see DeMarco Jackson actually coming. I see him making plays of practice. I see him elevating and playing positions that they wanted Zach Bond to play. Like I think Zach Bond's at Sam because he hasn't developed in the other areas. I think they want him to be able to drop into coverage and do different things. That was the initial vision for him, and it never happened. Like. It's tough for me to get there on him. And look, like I think they brought in DeMarco Jackson to surpass him. I think everybody they brought in is just kind of surpassed him at least at those other two spots. Like, and that's the way onto the field. Like someone is going to get hurt this year. Yeah, I think it does end up being DeMarco. But look, I like him a lot as a backup.
DeMarco.
Like, this is like the DeMarco Jackson
Sun Belt Defensive Player of the Year. I mean, even though he's from Appalachian State, like there's real street cred out here. He's not just a theory. Yeah.
Like the DeMarco Jackson hype isn't like, oh, this is the DeMario Davis replacement. This is the Pete Werner competition this year or whatever. I think he's a good player in that role that if he had to play, he could get some snaps. Like I watched him, like the things, again, I really, really liked. I liked the pressure elements. And when you're looking at it replacing a Caden Ellis, like he gets back there super fat. Like his first step is crazy. He's in the backfield like a bullet. Like it was just watching him was like, man, they could really scheme up a lot of stuff. Like there was just like a lot of like, just, going through on block blitzes. Like you put DA on scheming that. I think that there's a lot of opportunity for him. There's a play where he went up the seam with a running back, like all the way down the field. We saw Stephon Anthony do that one time too. So like, I'm not going to overhype it too much. The problem with him is like in the stuff where you're looking at like Will, Mike, probably more Will than Mike, is that there isn't a lot of man-to-man coverage in the college shape, but the zone dropping stuff looked okay. It looked fine. But I think those are the things that he's gonna have to prove. And the other thing he does really, really well is he knows how to like just sit back in space, time a throw, jump up and get his hands on it. So like you just see some really good instincts, some natural stuff to the linebacker position that like Zach Bond just doesn't have because he wasn't a linebacker.
I agree with him that if DeMario Davis or Pete Werner is out of the lineup, I don't think Zach Bond can make that transition. I've given up on that. And that would be a more valuable skill.
Yeah, no doubt.
Like replacing one of those guys is way more important to this team because as we know, Mike and Will play 100% of the snaps practically, and Sam plays like 5 snaps a game. The thing I like about Zach Bond and Sam is they told us early in his career that they thought he could be a Mike, and that ship has definitely sailed. But I think the Caden Ellis path is not that I think Zach Bond will have a Caden Ellis season, but it proved to me that they like came up with a plan for how to use a guy like that. We've seen them never be able to use guys like that. They never knew what to do with Howley Kakaha, for example. If Zach Bond gets 5 to 10 snaps a game and he's blitzing half the time and he can maybe get 5-6 sacks, that I think is what he could potentially do. I mean, he certainly has the frame for it. If you stand him next to the other guys, he's the tweener that they never have room for at defensive end. 6'3", I think he could be a 245-pound guy. So I think was it 6 sacks for Caden Ellis last year? Like that's what led me to believe like maybe there's like a niche they could find for this guy.
The thing that I think made Caden effective though, made him an effective blitzer, is that he was a believable player in coverage.
He could drop
do
in
other
coverage.
things. Yeah, it wasn't just a tell every time he was on the field.
It's true.
Bond's going to have to show he can do that to be able to be that 6-sack player. I think like the thing with DeMarco is that I think he could do that to a believable level, and then you do get the blitzability on the field. I think there's a chance overall. Like I think the safer bet is Bond gets more snaps this season, but I think there is a definite chance that DeMarco just takes all of it, and he's the guy at Sam, and also ends up being the backup for one of those other people. But we'll see how it.
Either way, we're kind of grasping at straws. This is why we've talked about linebacker depth.
But look, at least there's options now.
Yeah.
At least there's options, and it isn't just if Zach Bond is the guy, he's earned it. Like there's at least a worthy competitor, and I think we're seeing it now. Look, the other reason I won't count out Bond is because I think that I've said this before. I think Mike Hodges might be the best position coach on the team. I think there's a chance he's a head coach one day in the NFL. Like, so him having a guy for this many years, at some point maybe you do see something out of him. All right. Going on to debates, PFF put out their running back rankings, and it got Saints fans fired up. I'm going to read through the list here. They had Alvin 13th overall. The guys ahead of him.
It's sort of like a current ranking. It wasn't like their 2022 grades.
For the
it was
2023
like
season.
Yeah. Current ranking.
Yeah. Nick Chubb, number 1. Derrick Henry, 2. Christian McCaffrey, 3rd. Josh Jacobs, 4th. Jonathan Taylor, 5th. Saquon Barkley, Aaron Jones, Tony Pollard, Austin Eckler, Dalvin Cook, Breece Hall, Kenneth Walker, Alvin Kamara at 13. How's that strike you?
I mean, when you started going through the names for a while, it was hard to argue with anyone being ranked ahead of Alvin. The only qualm I might have is the younger guys. Kenneth Walker, like, you know, he had like 8 incredible games, you know. Tony Pollard, I'd probably be more excited about these guys being on the Saints because we know how running back works. Like, low mileage is a good thing. You look younger and more explosive, but Tony Pollard has been the benefit of Ezekiel Elliott does all the dirty work for the Cowboys. When it's, you know, 8-man box and it's 3rd and 1, they hand it to Ezekiel Elliott. Pollard gets to do stuff outside. He gets to do more in the passing game. I think the biggest problem with Alvin is he's had to be Ezekiel Elliott and Tony Pollard the last couple years. And it's made him look worse. He's been playing behind a pretty crappy offensive line. So, I mean, there's no question that Alvin's production has diminished so much for the last 2 years that I can't argue with that list. But what I'm curious of is now that he's got a Jamaal Williams, and if he had a healthy offensive line, would he look like Tony Pollard again? I think there's still a chance. Like that one might be a little disrespectful. But it's hard to argue because we haven't seen it in the last couple of years.
Yeah, so looking at this list, there's a handful of guys, 8 guys that I wouldn't beef with at all over them, and one of them's actually one of the guys you said you would beef with, but like Josh Jacobs, Aaron Jones, Nick Chubb, Derrick Henry, Christian McCaffrey, Saquon, Jonathan Taylor, Tony Pollard, like I think they're just comfortably ahead of them right now on these rankings, and maybe Alvin has a great season, and he turns that around and he surpasses a couple, but right now as you're ranking them, I can't go ahead of any of those people. Like I think they're all comfortably ahead right now. And then the young guys, like if Breece Hall hadn't gotten hurt, like he would have been my first pick in a dynasty draft now. The knee injury, like I'm probably not picking him first, but like off of what we saw, it was crazy at the time. I would not put Breece Hall out of him. I need to see more Walker. I think Dalvin Cook's basically in that same tier. I'd probably take Alvin over him right now because Minnesota's acting like
I'd probably give them the identical grade. Yeah.
And Eckler is probably slightly ahead. I think he has a better role in his offense, but maybe Alvin can be that guy. But he had 1,600 yards from scrimmage last year. Alvin had 1,300 from scrimmage, 1,387 last year. Like it's not 2020. Like 2020 was probably Alvin's peak season, and it has.
You just coincidentally tweeted out, replying to somebody, his 6 touchdown game. That was not that long ago, but it feels like a long time ago.
It does, and look, it's probably partly role. It's probably partly the offense. It's probably partly a lot of things. Like I think he can be a little bit better than he has been, but I want to see it before I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt over guys that are having those elite seasons right now. And I mean, 13th didn't make me mad. I probably would have had him 9th, but like 13th is like, all right, like fine.
Well, we're about to this summer, we're going to rank our top 20 Saints. And it is always tough to be like, what have you done? And where are you now in your career? That comes up a lot. What have you done? Alvin is way ahead of Tony Pollard. Who would I rather have in week 1 of this season? Who would I rather sign to a 3-year deal right now? You know, the young guy's going to win that at that position more than any other.
It's just sometimes, you know, if you're looking at another team and you're looking at Dalvin Cook and that team just signed last year's touchdown rushing leader and then drafted a guy in the 3rd round, you're reading those signs differently when you are emotionally removed from the situation.
You're right.
So I don't know. I think he has a lot. I think he has stuff to prove this year. And then you got the suspension probably on top of it. Like ninth would have been fair to me. 13th, it's a little, but it's not.
It didn't send a shock to my system. Like, I mean, I get it. I get why he's there. I do wonder though, like we've talked about this before, even in Alvin's heyday, they used to use words like pitch count. Obviously they loved the amount of snaps that Mark Ingram was getting as well. And as soon as Mark Ingram left, they wanted to bring in Latavius Murray. They never wanted Alvin to be the guy that had to run between the tackles double-digit times a game. They wanted to keep him fresh, and they wanted to keep him versatile. I think part of the reason you bring in a Jamaal Williams and then draft a Kendre Miller is they don't want Alvin getting 20-plus touches a game and a lot of them in the in between the tackles against running fronts. So this is a big. It's also let's see what he looks like if he's a little fresher this year.
It's also not just about supporting Alvin; it's a succession plan. We
see the Kendre Miller is for sure.
We see the succession plan 100%. Yeah, but in the interim, it's like we said, you support him. Maybe he becomes like 2017 Ingram. Young guy becomes 2017 Alvin. Maybe the other guy becomes Adrian Peterson. I doubt it, but I think Jamal's going to have a significant role. But still, I mean, I think we've seen this play out before. All right. Hard Knocks. Florio just wrote something the other day. Kind of, they're down to the 4 teams. 2 of them don't want to be in. Saints are one of the teams.
Saints are one of the 2 that doesn't want to be in.
They haven't said anything yet.
We know from their history they typically don't want to be.
It's a question we need to ask tomorrow. It's Jets, Commanders, Saints, and Bears are the 4 possible teams. How does the Saints being on their strike you?
Okay, well, it's the 4 possible teams because there's all these rules. Like if you've been in the playoffs, if you have a new coach, blah blah blah, and so those are the 4 teams. Not that have submitted their names or whatever. Those are the 4 teams that NFL rules say you can't say no. Basically, Hard Knocks has the right to force you.
They can force you on. Yeah.
I'm not worried about it for the Saints because they would be the 4th choice of those 4. I mean, that's what the Saints have become. Their only primetime games are what 2 Thursday night games and 1 Monday night.
Commanders though.
I think people love Ron Rivera. I think they love all the Commanders look, the Bears are the team with Justin Fields, the young up and coming team.
Name 4 Commanders.
Hold on. The Jets are but the Commanders have all the circumstance that makes a good TV show. New ownership, trying to change the culture of the team. They might even want to be on it to say, look at everything we're doing to rebrand and everything like that. The Saints have become, not a team that is, dying of national interest. So I think somehow the Jets would have to say, it's going to be the Jets if they're not allowed to say no with Aaron Rodgers and New York. The Bears have Justin Fields, the big city, the young team. I can't believe they get to the Saints at the top of that list. But I'd actually be sort of okay with that. It might make our jobs a little harder or just annoying, that they're getting access that they never give to us or whatever. But I'd like to get any insight I can from watching it. I'm okay with it, but I know the Saints don't want it. I know when they had Sean Payton, they really didn't want it, but I also think it's an entire organizational. They've never won it. I don't think Mickey Loomis wants it. I don't think Gail Benson wants it. I don't think Dennis Lauscha wants it, and I assume maybe Dennis Allen doesn't want it. So I'll believe it when I see it.
I think out of those 4, I think the Saints are probably the second most interesting.
It's possible. I mean,
you got Justin Fields, but
but the Bears were the worst team in the league.
Push that aside. Where are you at? What are the other storylines there that anyone would care about? I don't think the Commanders have any outside of the ownership thing. I think
people seem to love Ron Rivera though.
The thing that Hard Knocks is doing now though is they like stars. Yeah. There are no stars on any of those teams. I think the Jets, obviously Aaron Rodgers, and they got a lot of young, interesting players, and the Saints have stars. They have star players that everybody knows about. People would be excited to see Cam Jordan, Alvin, Marshawn, Derek Carr, Michael Thomas. Yeah. Chris Olave is a rising star that, he's relevant in fantasy circles, which means he's relevant to Hard Knocks audiences because those are NFL generalists. So I think they're probably second on that list overall. DeMario Davis. I just wouldn't like it around. I don't want to have to watch work. I'm sorry. I'm going to be jealous here. I don't want to go home after training camp and be like, well, let me get another half hour of work in here. It's just, I don't want to do it. But, look, I think it would be interesting in some respects, though, because we would get looks at stuff that we've just never seen before, and it would be interesting to see that. I think Dennis Allen should want it. I think it would help him to let people see
change his image
what he's actually
bit.
like. Yeah, because the things we hear about him from players is different than what you perceive, because he doesn't let you perceive a whole lot. He's kind of just, he's guarded, but then you talk to players and they're like, no, he's the guy that's trying to get us all hyped up. He's the guy trying to bring swag to our team. He's the guy telling us to do handshakes and have individualistic celebrations and all that stuff. I think people being able to see him in that regard would be good for his branding. Sure. So I think DA should be for it. I don't think the organization will be, though, just knowing what we know. And Florio, I think, probably accurately speculated the Jets said no, and the NFL is probably trying to wait for them to get a yes. And that's probably why there hasn't been an announcement yet, because last year's came in March. So we'll kind of see how that plays out. All right, our ideal market, ideal scenario of the season. I'm going to steal a little bit of what I'm about to say from Bobby Hebert. I thought he brought up a fascinating point. But question is, what is the ideal point or the ideal scenario for Taysom Hill this season, just as far as his role and what he does? And Bobby brought up something that I hadn't even thought about, and I thought it was the most interesting thing I've heard in a long, long time. He said, should they move Taysom to the running back room, get him out of the tight end room, and just embrace what he's actually good at? And would he become a better ball carrier if he was actually studying in that capacity? And I agree with Bobby.
Yeah, that's interesting. The running back room is so crowded now. Like, it's funny. We were just talking about, what are Alvin's touches compared to Kendre Miller and Jamaal Williams? Is there enough room for all three of those guys? Where does Taysom fit in? But they better make room for him. So last year, Taysom finally like embrace that he's almost the best running back on the team. Career high 96 carries, career high 575 yards. Okay, so now that the volume has increased, does the average of the insane career average of 5.5 go down? No, he has a career high 6 yards a carry. You keep doing that until someone proves they can stop it. Like, I know they brought in Derek. It's really interesting. Now they've got incredible depth at quarterback too. They don't even practice him at quarterback anymore. If Derek Carr goes down, you have Jameis Winston. But I don't want to take Derek Carr off the field, but I don't want that to stop. Taysom Hill was the main reason they beat Seattle. He was partly the main reason why they beat Atlanta in week 1 until Jameis had that great fourth quarter. In Cleveland, he was the guy that they hammered home, had an entire touchdown drive himself in the ice and the snow at Cleveland or whatever it was, the cold and the wind. And we came out of that game saying, why didn't you just give him the ball on every snap? I think they should be using Taysom more and in that capacity. No team in the NFL has ever proven they can stop that. Everyone says it's predictable. Yes, every once in a while there's a 0-yard run or a 1-yard run, but he's averaged 5.3, 5.8, 5.3, 5.3, and 6.0. You keep handing the ball to someone who keeps doing that. You've got to find a way to keep giving him the ball in that capacity. I guess you use him in the tight end room because he belongs on the field, so why not throw it to him more than they did? He only had 77 receiving yards last year. There was a year he had 7 touchdown catches. He could be doing more in every capacity. But yes, he better still be a big part of the running game.
I would get him out of there. I would do what Bobby says. Like I would turn him into a running back. That's what he's best at. Let him study it. Let him study why. Like
direct snap every time though.
However, hand him the ball. Like just give him the ball and let him run it. Like that is his special trait. Let him study how these things are coming together. Let him understand all the blocking schemes to the best of his ability. Have him looking at it like Alvin Kamara looks at it and trying to see the field like him. Learn some patience with the running as well. Like not everything has to be just like like it's like Mario when like the giant like missile comes out like and it's just shooting across the screen. Like be the smaller missile. Have a little bit of movement. Have a little bit of patience. But you can probably be a better runner if you study it through those eyes. I think the idea of him like being this like blocker and everything, like just move beyond it. Like just embrace what he's actually great at and just maximize it to the best of your ability. I think that's where he would be best used. The other thing we had newsworthy wise, joint practices with the Houston Texans. Kind of fascinating because they play them not just this season, but in week 6 of this season, you're going to learn their personnel. You're going to practice against their personnel, and then you're going to go play them 8 weeks later. That's a really interesting look to have at a team that you're going to play that early in the season. Even playing a team at all that you have joint practices with is always a little bit weird to me. It happens sometimes, but what kind of hits you about that circumstance?
Yeah, you brought this up, and I looked because I thought it had happened before, and it had not. They had not played a team in the season they had joint practices with funny enough about Hard Knocks. The one time I was like, I knew I had it in my mind that they were doing the 2015. They were supposed to have joint practices with the Texans, and they canceled it because the Texans were on Hard Knocks, and they didn't even want those 2 days to appear on Hard Knocks. So they've never actually done it before. I mean, there's an obvious reason why. I mean, why give anybody any intel on you? But I guess you're also getting the intel on them, and I guess I'm okay with it. Like, that feels like an overthinking thing to me. Like, that, that wouldn't completely stop me. Like, I don't think, they could, as they always say, the same thing when you sign a player on a team, they can give you intel. They're like, we see all that on tape anyway. What are we really going to learn that we can't learn from tape? So I'm okay with it. It doesn't make me think, oh, now there's a higher chance you're gonna lose to the Texans. So maybe I just kind of like the idea of not overthinking something, but there's a reason teams don't do it. I mean, just were you or?
It's a two-way street, I guess, to a certain extent. Like, whatever you're getting, you're also possibly giving away as well. I think there's some little things though. Like, if you're Marshawn Lattimore and you're going against their receiver and you see how he stems a route or he sets something up, like, you're going to know how he does that. Like, granted, you could work a counter off that and set someone up and do something else. But I think the familiarity with the players is definitely a thing. Like, if you're an offensive lineman going against Cam Jordan, like, you might pick something up. You might learn to tell. So, I mean, it's definitely possible. I do think, though, in this scenario where you have a more veteran team, like, if there's an advantage to be gained, it's probably more on the Saints side because the Texans are younger and their players probably just aren't as nuanced and haven't been around and don't have just as many reps overall. So I think that the Saints might kind of come out of here with a little bit.
It's funny because I just started to think maybe the opposite. Like, while you're saying that, I was like, if you're like a young left tackle going against Cam Jordan or a young right tackle going against Cam Jordan, it humanizes him. Like, if you've never faced him before and now you're facing him for the first time in a game, you might be intimidated. If you practiced against him for 2 days, you might be less intimidated. Maybe it actually helps the younger players.
You're probably going to get that in a quarter, though. Like, but if Cam sees your left tackle and there's something with how he sets his hand or how he moves or how he counters a swim move, he knows what to do with that, probably more so than their guys do. So
I have one interesting thought, though, on the Saints and Texans in general, and I finally think I figured it out. This is like the 6th time they've practiced against each other. The weather report put out a thing one time, the hottest training camps in the league, and the Saints actually have the 2nd hottest training camp in the league. Houston has the hottest.
We were out there, it was hell.
I think the idea is just nobody else wants to train with these guys, so they have to train with each other every year.
I like the joint practices, though, especially with the preseason game going away. And I think they should actually do this before every single game. And I think you almost shouldn't even play your real players in the preseason anymore. That should just be
I think we're trending that direction.
The competition. Yeah. Get your real reps in these practices, set up your scenarios, be able to put your players specifically in the things that you want to be able to work on, have a controlled environment, probably reduces the risk for injury because you aren't tackling to the ground or anything. Get all your work in there and let the guys that need to earn reps, win jobs, compete, let them handle the preseason and do that. Last thing, and this has been kind of fascinating. Alvin's out of practice. Kendre Miller's out of practice. That means Jamaal Williams has a very unique opportunity to be running back one every single day, probably get a lot more reps, get more chemistry with everybody. What do you think about just kind of how he's looked so far?
That's one of the things that's really stood out to me watching 2 OTAs is he just feels like entrenched as part of the first string offense. And when we see full squad mini camp next week, I assume we'll see Alvin out there. And then when we show up for training camp, we'll see Alvin and Jamaal and Kendre, and there'll probably be some sort of a rotation. But for now, it's good for him since he's a newcomer. I mean, already after the very first practice, he dropped a couple of passes, and then he's working off to the side on Derek Carr, and they're feeling each other out. I mean, I can already envision a story that we're doing after Jamaal Williams has a great week 2 and says, oh, that time I got to spend with Derek was invaluable in the preseason. He's not working with the first string offensive line very much since barely any of their offensive linemen are here, but it can only help. I'm so fascinated by it. Alvin, Jamaal Williams, Kendre Miller, Taysom Hill. I guess that can only be a good thing. But if you told me, I had a job to tell you their final stats for fantasy purposes this season, I'd be there with a pencil and an eraser and scratching out and being like, none of these numbers make sense. Where do they all fit? It does remind me of that year when there wasn't room for Ingram, Peterson, and Kamara ultimately.
I mean, I've said this before. If Taysom gets his 100 carries this year, there just isn't enough work for everybody once everybody's back and healthy. Like, it's going to be fascinating. Someone's going to get squeezed out. Him getting the chance to establish himself early, though, I think is important. I think it does a lot for him, and it's going to help him in the long run. All right, that's all we got for you guys today. Appreciate you listening. Brooke will be back with us on Wednesday. We're coming to you from a PJ's, so we'll talk to you then.